أفلا يتدبرون القرآن
ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Still in Surah Al-Baqarah and verses number 235 and 236 and 237, inshallah ta'ala, we'll discuss these beautiful verses of the Qur'an, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's rulings, something to regulate the life of the human beings, whether it's matters of belief, whether it's how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how to interact with others, the way of life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to observe and to live on the face of earth. This is the subject of the Qur'an. Deeds done by the heart, beliefs by the heart, things to be said by the tongue, things to be done by the different parts of our bodies in this world that we live in. We need the guidance, we need the light, and there is no way that a person would receive that and would get that except by the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is our job, this is our duty. The purpose of this program is for us to go back to the Qur'an, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that explains the Qur'an, and the way of the early generations of Islam, for us to be able to live our lives according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Not according to what we want, but according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth, wants. Definitely this is the best way of life on the face of earth and in the hereafter. These verses still about the rulings of divorce, divorce after being married, or someone that dies, for example, and leaves behind a wife, and different rulings, and being remarried after a first marriage, and so on and so forth. Things that a person should witness the miraculous nature of the rulings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's see first the first verse, verse number 235. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا جناح عليكم فيما عرضتم به من خطبة النساء أو أكننتم في أنفسكم علم الله أنكم ستذكرونهن ولكن لا تواعدوهن سرا إلا أن تقولوا قولا معروفا ولا تعزموا عقدة النكاح حتى يبلغ الكتاب أجله واعلموا أن الله يعلم ما في أنفسكم فاحذروه واعلموا أن الله غفور حليم. Which means there is no blame upon you for that to which you allude concerning a proposal to women, or for what you conceal within yourselves. Allah knows that you will have them in mind, but do not promise them secretly except for a saying, a proper saying. And do not determine to undertake a marriage contract until the decreed period reaches its end. And know that Allah knows what is within yourselves, so beware of Him, and know that Allah is forgiving and forbearing. This verse, it talks, continuation of the one before that, when a person dies and leaves behind a wife, that the iddah, the waiting period for a widow, someone that her husband died, as we get to know from the last episode, that it's 4 months and 10 days. And after that, there is no sin, there is no harm for her if she would get married to someone else. During this waiting period, which is the iddah, is it permissible for her to have people to propose themselves, for her to get herself ready for people to propose for her? Can they have the khitbah or the engagement during this period of iddah? The ruling is it's not permissible. But something that deals with the human nature, and something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would choose, that the Qur'an, the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, does not undermine or belittle the human emotions and our nature basically, and the inclination that a person would have between men and women, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated that in this verse. وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي مَا عَرَّضْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ خِطْبَةِ النِّسَاءِ. There is no sin on you, and this is for the men, when it comes to alluding indirectly concerning a proposal to a woman, or for what you conceal within yourselves. A woman, that she's a widow, her husband died, and she's still in the waiting period, it is not permissible for her to get married. It's not permissible for her to be engaged to anyone. It is not permissible for someone to directly tell her that I want to get married to you, or I want to marry you after you finish your period or your iddah period. This is all haram, this is all not permissible. What is permissible? If there is matter of ta'reed. Ta'reed, alluding to something. Meaning that what you say can mean an apparent meaning to it, and something that is far away for a person to understand. Two different meanings, a direct and indirect meaning. And a person would get from what he says something indirect to the meaning that he would say. For example, as Ibn Abbas and others, they said, a man would say, for example, to this woman that he wants to get married to her after her waiting period is finished. He would say, like, someone like you, anybody would like to marry, to get married to. Something of that nature, something that is indirect. And again, this has benefit, and there's a wisdom behind it. First of all, it's not direct. It's something that has to be respected when it comes to the waiting period. But the other benefit is that maybe that the woman or the person or the one that wants to get engaged to her, he might lose her, she might lose him, things of that nature. So something with an indirect speech that doesn't mean in a direct way whatsoever that he is intended or he's proposing himself to her. And this is the meaning of عَرَّضْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ خِطْبَةِ النِّسَاءِ أَوْ أَكْنَنْتُمْ فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ. Or you conceal something within your own self. A person in his heart that he wants to get married to that woman that her husband died. There is no harm, there is no sin in such a way or such a desire to be there. Again, this is in the permissible ways for a person to be engaged, for a person to be married. عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ سَتَذْكُرُونَهُنَّ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُوَاعِدُوهُنَّ سِرًّا. عَلِمَ اللَّهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that you will mention them. And this is again in the human nature. It's a good quality, for example, for a woman, definitely, to be faithful to her husband, the one that died, and that's why the period or the waiting period for her is 4 months and 10 days, which is longer than a divorced woman. But this is, when it comes to the different types of human beings, there are there, and this is something that can happen to people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, because of the perfect ruling in the Qur'an and in the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, deals also with those who would want to get married right after the waiting period. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching us that He knows subhanahu wa ta'ala what's in our hearts, what we conceal. If we can hide that from others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-knower. That's why we need to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just based on our outside appearance and what we say. We need to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with what's in our hearts, with what we conceal, and also what we show and what is outside appearance and so on. عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ سَتَذْكُرُونَهُنْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that you would mention them. سَتَذْكُرُونَهُنَّ, from the word dhikr, remember them, mentioning them. وَلَكِنْ لَا تُوَاعِدُوهُنَّ سِرًّا. What is forbidden, do not تُوَاعِدُوهُنَّ سِرًّا, meaning do not talk to them or do not promise them secretly. Do not promise them secretly, promising them for marriage after the waiting period. This is not permissible. إِلَّا أَن تَقُولُوا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, which means except for saying a proper saying. What is the proper saying? Is what's mentioned in the beginning of the verse, and that is, if something is to be said, something indirect. Something does not mean directly that he wants to be engaged to her, but something in general. As again, as we said, someone would say that such a woman, everybody or anybody would like to get married to. Something like that. She would understand from it that he is implying that he wants to get married to her after the waiting period is over. So this is al-qawl al-ma'ruf. This is what is proper. This is what is permissible to be said, if anything to be said. Again, with the proper, of course, etiquettes and manners and matters of hijab and things of that nature, of course. وَلَا تَعْزِمُوا عُقُدَةَ النِّكَاحِ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْكِتَابُ أَجَلَهُ, which means, and do not determine to undertake a marriage contract until the decreed period reaches its end. وَلَا تَعْزِمُوا. تَعْزِمُوا meaning, do not make a decision. which is the stage right before the action. When a person would have the desire, and then a person would have the different steps that a person would take before he would take an action. The last one, before a person would take an action, is al-azm, when a person would decide, and then he would take the physical means. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forbidding the men, and forbidding also the widows, not to make a decision and undertake the matter of the marriage contract till the waiting period is finished. حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْكِتَابُ أَجَلَهُ. Not before it's finished, as some of the similar meanings can be understood from previous verses, but here it means till it's finished, till the waiting period is finished, and in that case it's 4 months and 10 days, as we know. حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْكِتَابُ أَجَلَهُ. Till the book, that's what the meaning of the al-kitab, which basically here the kitab, or what's written, what is the iddah, what is the waiting period, till it reaches its end. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ فَاحْذَرُوا. See, the end of the verse is, no, وَاعْلَمُوا, that everybody should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in them, what is concealed in them, فَاحْذَرُوا. As a result of that, be warned, be careful, not to transgress the limits. Beware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His punishment if you would have inside of you what is evil and what's against the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We saw in the verse that there is something that is forbidden when it comes to promising them in secret. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the secrets, knows what is in the outside appearance of the people, know what they conceal. So that's why this is a warning for all of us, that we need to be watchful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He knows what's in our hearts. We might not see the effect of what's in our hearts on the face of earth when dealing with others. This is not in our capacity as human beings to judge people based on their what is concealed and what's in their hearts. But when it comes to the hereafter, what's concealed will be exposed, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, يَوْمَ تُوبِلَ السَّرَائِرِ, when the secrets will be open and it will be revealed for people to see. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warning those when it comes to these types of rulings, when it comes to marriage and what comes before that. This is a very easy way for the person to fall into sins, because of the inclination, the natural inclination between men and women. And a person can deceive the other side, and people can break the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they don't have to see the wisdom behind it, they need to observe it. Like one of which, for example, if a woman, her husband dies, she's supposed to stay in her home. It is not permissible for her to leave, to go anywhere, unless it's a necessity. But the norm is that she stays at home for the whole period, that is the 4 months and 10 days. And this is out of being faithful towards her husband, and also to protect her from others and so on. And once the period is finished, then there's no harm for her, there's no sin for her, if she is to be engaged and to get married and so on. So, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ فَاحْذَرُوا, because the issue was, when it comes to matters of indirect speech, something that they can say secretly versus what is openly. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning the believers from transgressing the limits, and knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what they conceal, what's inside of them, so that they become aware of that and they would fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ. And know that Allah is forgiving and forbearing. Know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving. If they would fall into the sin, with regards to what's mentioned, if they know that this is a sinful thing for them to say it in a direct way, when it comes to engagement while the woman in her period after her husband died, and we have to be careful. This is in the case of a woman, her husband died. Not in the case of a woman that she is divorced and during her waiting period, because during her waiting period, it is the right of her husband to take her back, and it's not permissible for anyone, directly or indirectly, to propose anything, or to tell her that he wants to get married to her after her period is finished, or to say to her even in indirect way that anybody would like to marry to you and things of that nature. This is not permissible whatsoever. This is only in the case when a woman, her husband dies, right? So there's no return for him, and she's still in her waiting period. Only the indirect speech, that she would get the message that maybe this person might propose to her, not during the waiting period, but after the waiting period is over. So if any of the transgressions occur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiver if they would return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Say for example, somebody would say it in a direct way. This is a sinful act. Some of the ulama, they said then she is forbidden for him. But the correct opinion, she's not. If a person would seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most forgiver. But this is definitely a sin. Halim meaning forbearing. That means he does not punish his slaves immediately after the sin. And this is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, it shouldn't be a mean or a reason for the person to continue in the path of transgression, to continue into the path of a sin. When a person knows that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Halim, is forbearing, meaning he does not punish his slaves immediately. Sometimes the punishment, if a person does not repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, comes later. And one of the worst punishments on the face of earth is when a person is deprived from doing what is good. Is when a person would continue to commit the sin. This is the real punishment. Because if a person continues in that path and dies in that path, this is a dangerous situation for the person. And that's why the real mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when a person would repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something to that meaning, it was one of the traditions that was mentioned from the time of Ali radiallahu anhu, that when a thief, he was caught, and as we know, the punishment for someone to steal with certain conditions, of course, is for hands to be cut off. And before they did that to him, it was said that Ali radiallahu anhu, he asked him, did you do that before? Is that your first time? And the man would not answer. And then after it happened, he asked him again, was that your first time? He said no, that he did it many times before, but he was never caught. So in return he said to him, I know that, because I know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Halim, is forbearing. He gives you chance after a chance, right? And when a person would ignore these chances and thinks that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help him escape, whether it's a worldly punishment or in the hereafter, one after another like this, without repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a dangerous route that a person would take. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Halim, but that should bring shyness in the hearts of the believers, that they should immediately repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even if the people would commit such sins and disobeys the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they think that some goodness comes as a result of that, unless they repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no goodness. The goodness, the real goodness, is to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are rules that governs the lives of the believers when it comes to relationships. And again, this is for a widow, her husband died, and when it comes to engagement after that. And then inshallah ta'ala we'll get into some of the more rulings when it comes to matters of divorce. So stay with us inshallah ta'ala. We'll come back after the break.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن.
Ask Huda.
If you're still in Mecca or close by to Mecca, then you have to know that you are still in the state of ihram. As long as it is not for sale, then he does not have to pay zakah for it. Forbade praying witr similar to Maghrib prayer. So whoever prays witr 3 rak'ahs and sitting after the second rak'ah as if he's praying Maghrib prayer, this is forbidden, this is haram. Euthanasia is permissible with animals but not with human beings. If an animal is suffering, killing an animal for a legitimate reason is permissible. Both are acceptable, but the majority say that after the ruku' is the place of qunut. But both was reported.
Have a question or concern on your mind? Huda TV decided, based on popular demand, it will be bringing you an additional episode of Ask Huda with Shaykh Azim bin Luqman Al-Hakim, live from Jeddah, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Verses in Surah Al-Baqarah that talks about some of the rulings after, whether it's divorce or someone's husband dies and so on, rulings that needs for us to understand and to apply in our life and to educate others and to witness the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to witness the miraculous natures of these rulings that comes with great wisdom. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He reveals verses in the Qur'an, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks such rulings in matters of the Qur'an. Definitely this is something to be honored for a person to take it seriously and to apply it in our life and to see the importance of marriage and what comes after marriage. And one of which, as we would see inshallah ta'ala, in verse number 236 from Surah Al-Baqarah, the case when divorce happens before consummating the marriage. What happens if people would get married and before consummating the marriage, they just did the marriage contract. And before they consummate the marriage, divorce happens, which is valid, something that might happen. What to do with matters of the iddah, the matters of the mahr, the matter of the dowry that a person would give or not give. Verse number 236, this is the case when divorce happens before the consummation of the marriage and there was no mahr, there was no dowry set. What is the ruling here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم لا جناح عليكم إن طلقتم النساء ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة ومتعوهن على الموسع قدره وعلى المقتر قدره متاعا بالمعروف حقا على المحسنين. Which means, and there is no blame upon you if you divorce women you have not touched nor specified for them an obligation, but give them a gift of compensation, the wealthy according to his capability and the poor according to his capability, a provision according to what is acceptable, a duty upon the doers of good. So here again the verse starts with لا جناح عليكم. لا جناح meaning there is no sin, there is no blame unto you, عليكم unto you. إن طلقتم النساء, if طلقتم, talking to the believing men, if you divorce النساء, women. ما لم تمسوهن, there is no sin for you if you would divorce the women that you have not touched. ما لم تمسوهن أو تفرضوا لهن فريضة, nor specified for them an obligation. What it means by this, there is no sin to divorce. Divorce is not a sinful act. And some people think that this is maybe haram or something of that nature. It's not, of course. This is permissible. Yes, there are means and steps to be taken to avoid divorce. And there are things mentioned in the Qur'an. If the dispute comes from the husband's side, what to do? If the dispute comes from the wife's side, what to do? If it comes from them both, what to do? All these different situations is explained in the Qur'an. And that's why the entity of marriage, it's such an important thing in the life of a Muslim. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the believers to keep it strong, because this is the base for any healthy environment and healthy society, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for children to be raised in a proper environment, for them to be strong believers and those who would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the proper way. So the religion of Islam, the rulings will take all kinds of means to keep the marriage intact. But if it happened, if it's something that is inevitable, if marriage will bring more harm than divorce and separation, then there is no harm. So there is no sin when it comes to divorcing women, but here in a specific case, and that is مَا لَمْ تَمَسُّهُنْ. تَمَسُّهُنْ literally means if you not had touched them. Touching them meaning it refers to sexual intercourse, meaning that they did not consummate the marriage. They did the marriage contract, and they would have, or they would wait for another date, a future date, to consummate the marriage, where is the walima and so on. So if this has happened, and the divorce happens before they consummate the marriage, and in the case they didn't set a certain dowry or money or any of the obligations. An obligation here means the mahr, the dowry that a man would give to the woman. This is definitely mandatory in matters of marriage. And if marriage is being done with the condition then there is no mahr, that there is no dowry, then this is not a valid marriage. It has to be specified, has to be there. But in the case where they got married, but they didn't specify a mahr, they didn't mention it, right? The marriage is valid, but the woman in that case, she would get the mahr of the like of her level in the society and so on. So this is the case when they get married and they didn't specify the amount of the mahr, and they did not consummate the marriage. What is the ruling? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَتِّعُهُنَّ عَلَى الْمُوسِعِ قَدَرُهُ وَعَلَى الْمُقْتِرِ قَدَرُهُ مَتَاعًا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. مَتِّعُهُنْ, meaning give them mut'a, give them some compensation, give them a gift, right? And how much this gift should be according to the capability of the husband that divorced his wife. If he's rich, he should give something accordingly. If he's poor, he should give something accordingly. And this is to teach the human beings, to teach the believers they should have this goodness in their hearts. And they might have broken the heart of this woman that he married her and then he divorced her before the consummation of the marriage. And to make her feel good, then this is a case where a person would give something, whether it's a gift, and it's accordingly a person would spend from his wealth, seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not a waste, it's a good deed to be done, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in the Qur'an. We know that many reasons can come about when it comes to divorce, especially before consummating of the marriage. And that's why it might be something that brings enmity between both parties, things that they have ill feelings towards one another. Many reasons can be there. So that's why people should submit themselves to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and overcome these feelings and all these types of things that might arise, and give from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for them. Again, it's according to the wealth of the person. If he have wealth, he gives accordingly, then it means something that is might be something valuable for him. And if a person is poor, according to his capability. حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُحْسِنِينَ, that this is haqq. This is a right upon the doers of good. It's a right upon the doers of the good. And some of the ulama, they said that he should give her half of what they would have agreed as a mahr, because this is the ruling as we would see the next verse. So if the mahr is not being specified, then to see what is the mahr of the like of this woman, and then in that case he would give her half of that. He would give her half of that, as according to the mahr, that if they would have agreed on a mahr, how much would it be, the dowry? Then he would give half of that as a gift from him. So again, this is to keep the human goodness from one person to the other in place. Protecting ourselves from the evil within our own selves, the love to revenge, the love to hurt others when they hurt us, for example. This is something that a believer should stay away from. If a woman, this happened to her, even if it happened without a just reason, this is something that is valid. It's valid for a man to do that. So she has to be patient, and she should seek the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be content. And the same thing for the man, he should honor the fact that it's, yes, if it's permissible for him, he should still give her a gift, again something that is should be close to equal to what is half of the mahr is. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching the believers. Another benefit that we can benefit from this verse is that when the marriage contract is being done, it is not permissible for the person unless they consummated the marriage. Yes, they are husband and wives, but can they be together? Meaning, if they would have relations like a husband and a wife relations and so on, is it permissible for them? It's permissible because they're husband and wives, but once they have these types of relations, intimate relation, or even they lock a door on themselves, they become alone. And this is something that the ulama, they talked about, and they would give some hints of what that means when the curtains are down, when the doors are closed, things of that nature. People that are married, but they did not consummate the marriage yet. To the people, they did not consummate the marriage yet. They didn't have the ceremony or whatever there is to show that they are husband and wife living together and so on. She's still by her household, by her father, and he still lives away from her. They're not living together yet. They just performed the marriage contract. That means this should be honored. And they should not do something that if divorce happens, right, and it happens, then in that case, if they had consummated the marriage, if they had closed the door behind them, that means they were in seclusion of others, they were together alone. In that case, if divorce happens before the known consummation of the marriage, then in that case he has to give her all the mahr, all the dowry that they agreed upon, not just half of it. And that's why it's something that should be honored and should be respected by the people, and not to say, well, she's my wife, and she would say that he is her husband. If it's to the people that they didn't consummate the marriage yet, it should be respected, so that if divorce happens, then it brings problems. Because then after that, if she wants to be married or remarried to someone else, she would be considered that she is not a virgin, she's been married before, which is different than someone that just had the contract and they divorced before even touched, before even consummating the marriage. But again, in this verse, in this case, they didn't set an obligation when it comes to matters of mahr. It is not set, so the order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to give her something, to give her a valuable gift according to his capabilities. If he's rich, he gives accordingly. If he's poor, he gives accordingly. And that's why al-musi', which is mentioned in the verse, وَمَتِّعُهُنَّ عَلَى الْمُوسِعِ قَدَرُهُ. Al-musi' is the one that is spacious for him, meaning that he has wealth. The matter is not tight on him. That's why it's one of the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a person would have wealth, when a person would have means on the face of earth, this is ni'mah, this is a bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the people, for them to witness the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for them to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that provides. And since He's the provider subhanahu wa ta'ala, He ordered us to give from our wealth. And that's why these types of money is a pure halal money for the one that takes in the proper way. So the mahr, for example, it's halal. It's one of the most pure money that a woman would get, because it's something that is halal for her. Something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it an obligation for the husband to pay the mahr to the wife. And it's her rights only. It's not the money of her guardian. It's not the money of her father. It's her money, and she is to use it the way that she likes, and so on. And al-muqtir is the one that things made tight on him. And originally, or literally, the root meaning of al-iqtar, which is the root word of al-muqtir, it refers to, or originally it means when a person would smell the smoke of cooking meat, right? When a person is cooking meat, and meat is something that is valuable, a poor person might be deprived from eating meat. The rich person, if he's cooking meat, for example, he cannot prevent the poor from smelling the smell of it. So al-muqtar comes from that, in which a poor person, that the only thing that he gets is to smell, basically, what is valuable. So if a person, things have been made tight onto him, he's poor, he is also to give according to his level, according to his capability. And also shows that this is the nature of any society. There are rich and there are poor. And when the rich will pay their dues and their obligations, their obligatory charities, the zakah money, and that reaches the poor, definitely there won't be enmity between the rich and the poor. This everlasting battle between the rich and the poor, it does not exist in a healthy society ruled by the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People that understand the rulings of the religion of Islam, you would never find this dispute between the rich and the poor, because the rich are giving their dues. They're giving their obligatory zakah, and it reaches the poor, because the zakah has a certain set of routes to it. It's not just a general sadaqah or general charity that can be given to anyone. It's specific people only. So the poor then won't envy the rich, as it happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ when it was applied. The poor at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they never envied the rich. Actually, they only envied them in a good way, in only one thing. And envy in a good way, which is al-ghibta, in which they wish that they have the same as the rich, for them to use the money for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they went to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and they told them that our brothers, the rich one, the poor, they went to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they said that the rich brothers of Islam, they pray like we pray, they fast like we fast, but they surpass us by making hajj and umrah, by making jihad, fighting in the cause of Allah. They give sadaqah, charity. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam called them to do good deeds by making tasbih and so on. But the point of the hadith is that the poor at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't go to the Prophet ﷺ saying, these rich brothers in Islam, they are better than us because they have more wealth. The only concern that they had is, would they get more rewards than us because we are poor? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most just, and He is the most merciful. And then we continue inshallah ta'ala with another ruling when it comes to matters of divorce and dowry and mahr, rulings in the verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. Stay with us inshallah ta'ala. We'll come back right after the break.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن
إذا دكت الأرض دكا
Do you want to learn how to recite the Qur'an? Do you want to read Islamic books in Arabic? You may enroll in a small group.
العسل من السوق اشترى. نعم اشترى.
A private lesson.
من مثلها في فضلها.
من مثلها في فضلها.
Or at your own pace to fit your schedule.
هل أنت راغب في المعهد؟
Courses for sisters with female instructors. We're bringing you the latest software technology, professional instructors, and a state-of-the-art classroom to the comfort of your home. Enroll now in Huda Academy. Huda Academy, your gateway to authentic Islamic knowledge.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Still with verses about matters of divorce and mut'a and compensation and dowry and things of that nature. Again, it's rulings that it's important for us to learn, and those who are about to get married, they need to know these types of rulings. And if a person doesn't know, they should ask the people of knowledge, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. And getting to know some of these rulings, it should not be valid then for us to give fatwas and to give verdicts and to start to implementing and applying these things, because it needs more details than that. And that's why we need to refer to the people of the book, the people of knowledge. We need to refer to them. We need to refer to the people of knowledge, the ulama, when it comes to matters of marriage, divorce, halal and haram. Those ulama, those scholars of the religion of Islam, those who apply the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to ask them with clear evidence, of course, so that we make sure that we apply the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why it's a great mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we get to learn the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is basically, a person should feel honored when he or she would get to learn what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. So looking into verse number 237, in the case also there is a divorce. We talked about the divorce before consummation of marriage, and there was no mahr specified. Now the case where the divorce happened before consummation of marriage also, but there was mahr, there was dowry specified. It doesn't have to be given, but it's something that was specified, that he would give that much mahr or the dowry and so on. What is the ruling in that case if divorce happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَإِن طَلَّقْتُمُوهُنَّ مِن قَبْلِ أَن تَمَسُّوهُنَّ وَقَدْ فَرَضْتُمْ لَهُنَّ فَرِيضَةً فَنِصْفُ مَا فَرَضْتُمْ إِلَّا أَن يَعْفُونَ أَوْ يَعْفُوَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ عُقْدَةُ النِّكَاحِ وَأَن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَنْسَوْا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. Which means, and if you divorce them before you have touched them, and you have already specified for them an obligation, mahr, then give half of what you specified, unless they forego or remit the right, or the one in whose hand is the marriage contract remits it. And to remit it is nearer to righteousness, to taqwa. And do not forget graciousness between you. Indeed, Allah of whatever you do is seeing. So this is another case now, the ruling of divorce before consummation of marriage, and with mahr being specified. وَإِن طَلَّقْتُمُوهُنَّ. And if you divorce them, if you divorce the women, and that also, by the way, implies clearly that divorce in the hands of the man and the husband, and not in the hands of the wife, not in the hands of the woman. These are the rules from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we need to stick to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to say it the way it is, and to apply it the way it is, without being affected by the environments that we live in, without being affected by the disbelievers and their way of life. This is the perfect way of life. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, for us to be happy on the face of earth and in the hereafter. وَإِن طَلَّقْتُمُوهُنَّ. If you divorce them, مِن قَبْلِ أَن تَمَسُّوهُنَّ. Before you touch them, before you have touched them. And we heard of what is the meaning of تَمَسُّوهُنَّ, meaning before you had sexual relations, which means consummation of the marriage. But in this case, وَقَدْ فَرَضْتُمْ لَهُنَّ فَرِيضًا. In the previous verse, it was the ruling for those who did not specify a specific mahr. In this verse, وَقَدْ فَرَضْتُمْ لَهُنَّ فَرِيضًا. And you indeed specified an obligation for them. What is the faridah? What is the obligation here? It's the mahr. It's the dowry, that it's the right of the woman. So they specified that. The person get married to his wife, and he said that he would give her 1,000 or whatever mahr, and they agreed upon that, and then divorce happened before they consummated the marriage. They're still not being alone in any place, right? Because even if they are alone in a place, and the door is shut, and they are alone in it, even if they didn't do anything, even if they didn't have intimate relations, then if divorce happens, she is entitled to the whole mahr. She's entitled to the whole mahr and not half of it, which is a very important point that we need to be aware of. So if they divorced before consummation of the marriage and the mahr has been specified, then what is the ruling? فَنِصْفُ مَا فَرَضْتُمْ. نِصْفُ مَا فَرَضْتُمْ. Half of what you made it an obligation. You made it an obligation when you said, I would give this as mahr, and they agreed to it, and the matter was over. Divorce happened before the consummation of the marriage, then he has to give half of that mahr. Not the whole mahr, but only half. Again, the marriage has not been consummated, and divorce happened before that, so she get only half of the mahr. إِلَّا أَن يَعْفُونَ أَوْ يَعْفُوَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ عُقْدَةُ النِّكَاحِ. Unless, يَعْفُونَ, here it's referring to the women, and that's why the noon is noon al-niswa, referring to a female. So unless the woman forgives and pardons and remit her right is to get half of the mahr. If she forgives, if she remits that, if she says that I don't want it, right, this is a good thing for her. إِلَّا أَن يَعْفُونَ. And al-'afw, or pardoning, or forgiving, or remitting something that is of your right, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, it's a rewardable thing, especially if it would brings what is good. If it brings evil, then definitely there is no such a thing as good if it brings evil. But if it brings good, right, it relieves, for example, the man from the burden that he has to give half of the mahr, right, and she is in no need of it, right, it's up to her, without being forced, without being pressured, something that she would do out of her goodwill, seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Definitely this is a good thing. أَوْ يَعْفُوَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ عُقْدَةُ النِّكَاحِ, which means, or the one in whose hand is the marriage contract, forgoes it or remits it. Who is that person? Either the woman, she would forgives and pardon and remit it, which is her right, because the mahr, the dowry, is something that belongs to her. She owns it, right? It's not for her wali, it's not for her guardian, it's her money. And as agreed upon, that the wali or the guardian, he has no rights to this money whatsoever. So what is meant by أَوْ يَعْفُوَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ عُقْدَةُ النِّكَاحِ? That also, as she forgives, or the one that can remit that, the one that he has in his hands the marriage contract. Some said it's the wali, it's the guardian. But this is a weaker opinion. Because again, the guardian, he has no rights whatsoever to the mahr. He has no rights, no access to the mahr or the dowry of the woman. Even if she is his daughter, unless she gives it to him out of her goodwill because it's her money. But to think that this is his money, this is not permissible. So this is a weaker opinion. The stronger opinion is that the one that has the control and has in his hand the marriage contract is who? Is the husband, the one that divorced. So that's why the issue of remitting or forgiving and so on, it's either from the woman, she would forgive and she would say that she doesn't want the half of the mahr, or the husband, he would forgive, right, and he would give. And he would give what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it an obligatory on him. أَوْ يَعْفُ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ عُقْدَةُ النِّكَاحِ. So although the divorce happened, and the hearts might be having some ill feelings towards one another, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is encouraging them to wash away that, to purify the hearts from anything that would brings any envy or hatred or anything of that sort. This is a fact in relationships. People might face that in their relationships. They should not forget that they need to have purity in their hearts and not to carry any illness or ill feelings towards others. وَأَن تَعْفُوا, and again it proves that the one that is in his hand, the marriage contract, is the man, is the husband. And this is something that we should make it very clear. It is the husband's right, it's not the wife's right whatsoever. وَأَن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. And if you pardon, if you forgo, if you remit your rights, أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. In this case, it's closer to righteousness. It's close to at-taqwa, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to be dutiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to purify oneself from sins. This is closer to that, if you forgive. That means this is an encouragement for the wife in that case that got divorced, or the husband in that case, is to forgive and to pardon one another, and not to carry ill feelings again. And this is close to them to matters of taqwa. If they want to be among those who have taqwa, then they should forgive, and they should seek help and rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And definitely the people of taqwa, we have heard in the Qur'an in many verses that the rewards in this life and in the hereafter, great rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make ways out for them from difficulties. And if a divorce happens and people are going through difficulties, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Whoever have taqwa, whoever fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dutiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the meaning of taqwa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make way out for that person and would provide for that person from where he does not expect. And a rizq or provisions is not just wealth or food or so, it's anything that a person would gain on the face of earth. So if the woman, she got divorced and she forgives when it comes to the half of the mahr, or the husband the same way, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said when it's closer to taqwa, there can be then as a reward for them that they would get what is better for them. She would get married to to someone that is better than him. And it becomes the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the qadr of Allah, that this has happened. Yes, and people get sad and so on, but you never know what's waiting for the person. What's the destiny of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the person. And that's why لا ينال ما عند الله إلا بطاعته, that you can never receive what's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of goodness unless a person is in matters of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People in their relationships, because of the whispers of shaitan and because of the materialistic life that they indulge themselves in, they don't see anything but the apparent look of things. They see the disputes in a relationship, that he did this, she did this. And in many cases they would overlook the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would overlook the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Not too many people would forgive. Not too many people would give up some of their rights, for example. Justice is definitely something that should not make anybody upset. And justice is a good thing. And when two people will come and they have a dispute and they come forward to a judge or someone to judge between them, if they ask the judge to be just with them, this is definitely a good thing. But they might, after justice has been served, they would still have some ill feelings towards one another if it comes to my right versus your right. Because they might have their own interpretations of things. They might think that the ruling was not just for them and so on. But when it's taken to a higher level, and this high level of the goodness, and that's something that which is said right after that, وَلَا تَنْسَوُا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. Do not forget about the graciousness between you. If it's a matter of graciousness, not just a matter of justice. Graciousness or fadl, which is a high level, when a person would give up some of his right. The other side give up some of his right, so that they would meet somehow, and their hearts will be full of goodness towards one another. They won't have hatred towards one another. That's why the matters of sulh, or bringing people to make peace between two parties, it's not necessarily something to be dealt with justice. Whether it's between two people, two tribes, two countries, whatever there is. Right? And this is mentioned in the Qur'an. So the matter of reconciliation is different than dealing in matters of dispute with justice. Justice would still can have some enmity between people towards one another. But when it's a matter of sulh, it's a matter of reconciliation, that means they would do and take the means that they would be, after the reconciliation, after the deal, they are good towards one another. And that might entitle in some cases in which a person would give up some of his right and things of that nature, as long, of course, as they do not break the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Relationships, marriage relationships, it has to be It is sustained by matters of afu. It is sustained by matters of pardoning one another. When they are married, they forgive one another. If the wife, for example, did not fulfill the rights of her husband, not in a persistent manner, one time, things of that nature, he should forgive, right? For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that should bring what is good. And the same thing, if he did not fulfill a right of her, right, in a certain incident, she should forgive and not to remember that, and not to cause harm as a result of that, because this is closer to righteousness. Shaitan comes and whispers and says that if you forgive, then he will take advantage of that. She will take advantage of that. And they become worse and worse, right? This is whispers of shaitan. And definitely, if it brings what is worse, then maybe in that case a different solution should be sought, and not necessarily to forgive and to pardon and so on. But in general, أَن تَعْفُوا أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى, that if you pardon, this is closer to taqwa. وَلَا تَنْسَوُا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ, do not forget the graciousness between you, even though the marriage was not consummated, but there was some form of a relationship. This is an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we should not forget that. This is part of al-Iman, Husn al-Ahd, from al-Iman, as the Prophet ﷺ said to Aisha radiallahu anha, that to remember those people, those who you had some form of a relationship with them, with matters of goodness, this is part of al-Iman. Not to be unfaithful to others, just because dispute or something that happened between them, divorce occurred. Still, the order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts, and not to forget the goodness and the graciousness between them both, when they sat together, when they agreed upon the mahr, and they were discussing that, and each party, they were looking forward for the marriage and so on. These are all kinds of good things between them. They should not forget that. Inna Allah bima ta'maluna basir. Indeed, Allah, of whatever you do, is seeing what you're doing. That means, be watchful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't deal with people as people only, as this is the whole scene. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us. So fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in them, in the people, in dealing with them. Know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you and giving you rewards, or you subject yourself to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So definitely our way of dealing with others would be totally different if we would never be in state of forgetfulness when it comes to the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basir, is all-seeing subhanahu wa ta'ala, our actions and our speech and our intentions and what's in our hearts and so on. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts and to bring strength into the homes of the believers, and for them to raise worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who would defend the deen of Allah, the religion of Islam, and to make the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala superior. And inshallah ta'ala, next time we continue with more verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.